All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Conversation Starters to Move Beyond the Money, Expand Your Practice webinar. If this is your first Expand Your Practice, we do this periodically, and it's open to everybody. I'm Rod Zeeb.
I'm Lori Coonen.
There you go. And so I'm the CEO, and she's the Chief Learning Officer at the Heritage Institute, which I've helped found in 2003. And Lori, you've been with us since, well, you started
2009.
training.
Yeah,
2005, you started training. Yeah. So been around for a while, and we've trained thousands of people and practicing on 4 different continents. So welcome to the webinar. And just to be transparent, I know and understand that webinars are really popular because you can watch them over and over again and you can see what you want. They're good training tools and teaching and all that, but I'm not a fan from this end of it because I can't see your reactions. I can't see anybody out there. And if you're in a Zoom meeting, you can see the participants. So every now and then you'll be talking along and all of a sudden you'll see several people going, which means I need to clarify something. We don't have that. So, but we can have a dialogue. So since it's a webinar and we can't have an open dialogue, we have the chat feature. And we want you to use the chat feature. So if you have comments or you have questions or anything out, put them in the chat. And as we go along, I'm going to ask you to put things in the chat that we will save, for future. We'll talk about it now, but we'll also save it so that people have it who watch this thing later. So anything else we should start with there, Lori, or are we good to go?
That's great. Yeah. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat as well. We will be watching that throughout the entire hour that we're with you today. So sit back, enjoy, get engaged, and participate.
Participate, yes. We need you to participate because this is supposed to be as interactive as you can have it as a webinar. So if you've ever seen our alignment conversation methodology or any of that stuff, you know that we focus on desired outcomes. And desired outcomes are a final result that you can measure success or progress. Money or more money is never the desired outcome. What people can get from the money is their desired outcome. So focusing the conversation on what they really want gets you beyond the money and gives you the money conversation some context. So when they start talking about the money, you can put it into the context. And those desired outcomes can be tangible or intangible. And so tangible things are like, when I retire, we want to go on a cruise once a year, or we want to bucket list kind of things.
Lake house, a cottage.
The cottage, yeah. And we want to spend some time
boat.
More time with the grandkids, or those
education.
Yeah, all of those things are tangible, and and they all have some cost that goes with it, both in time and money usually. And then the intangibles, and we'll have you in a second just jot some in here in the chat. The intangibles are things like, I want peace of mind. I want to know I'm okay in retirement. I mean, those are the intangibles.
Confidence, right?
Confidence, yeah.
Family harmony.
Yeah. High on the list.
Right?
Yeah, and it gets higher on the list as they get closer to retirement because they realize, when we're retired, it's going to be a different dynamic for everybody. And so that family harmony becomes really important. And as you start getting your mortality, you start worrying about your mortality, then it really gets, important for people to have. So I want you to think for a second. I'm going to give you a couple minutes here, or a couple seconds here. Think of some examples of questions you could ask that would get you tangible things that your client or prospect wants. Like I said, like how often do you get a new car or something like that. So think about those, and let's start with just tangibles and put in the chat, a couple of things that you think of right away, and we'll just give you a minute or two.
Yes. I mean, some of your favorite types of questions that you've asked your clients to get the tangible, or, maybe you've seen questions that you want to start using. So add those to the chat real quick.
We need a timer, or what's the Jeopardy music, right?
Oh, the Jeopardy, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Lori, can you see the chat?
Yeah. So we got one here, which said, it says kind of, what are your top 5 priorities in retirement?
Oh, cool. Yep.
Okay. So it's kind of open-ended, but yet typically clients, if you're coming to work with a financial advisor, they're going to think of the kind of tangible things, right?
Yeah.
I think
And
that
giving
would,
them a number like 5, that's a great question, because it's like they're not one and done. They have to think a little bit about that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. And those are likely to be tangible. I mean, those,
Right.
that 5 priorities, want to go
Right.
places.
Right.
So,
Someone also said, very similar to what you said about the bucket list. So what's on your bucket list over the next 10 years?
yeah. Yeah.
And I know when I was in the financial planning world, we would create actual spreadsheets for them and show them their first 10 years of retirement and put in the dollar amounts for each of the things they wanted to purchase or experience. So yeah, I've used that question before too.
And, in a lot of ways, this gets you into how you can identify what they need in retirement. Because we'll talk about it in a little bit, but when you just ask them how much do you want in retirement, that doesn't do a lot of good. It's going to be some random number. Okay. So now let's talk about intangible examples like peace of mind, security, kids being happy, those kind of things. Put into the chat questions you would ask, and it could be some of those, but what you would ask to try and get some examples of intangible things that your clients would want down the road. Not necessarily in retirement, but down, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, something like that, depending on what their age is on. The same thing, we'll save these as we go along and we'll respond in a minute or two.
This one's a little bit more hard or more difficult, I'm thinking, Rod, because there's not a lot of action right now.
Well, and it is though, because most people think in terms of the tangibles.
Right.
They don't think in terms. This is probably easier even for the clients. You ask the clients that, they're like, huh? But when you start talking about what would you like to see for your kids down the road, and then you start talking about harmony and, I'm talking together, that's probably an easier place to get the intangibles. Mm-hmm. But when people first talk to, I was the estate planning attorney, you were the financial advisor. When they come into those professionals, they're not planning on talking about anything that's intangible. they're talking about time and money. What is it? So.
Well, and here's one. It's a question that it states, you're coming to me to work together, to partner together on your finances. So this is a financial advisor. What can I take off your plate? Mm-hmm. Or here's another one. Or what are you seeking by partnering together? And I think, that's where that peace of mind, confidence that I have enough money to retire, that's where you're going to get those types of, so that's a great start.
And those are really questions that you need right away, because Jack Beatty, who worked with us for a lot of years, most clients can't start talking about other things until they know they're okay. That, they're taken care of, they can have the things that they want. Now we can start talking about philanthropy with the kids or anything else, but first they got to know that they're okay, however they're going to define that. And getting that out, but they've normally thought all the way through that. So asking these questions and getting them to get it out is helpful for everybody. So, like I said, this session is designed to help you get past the discussion of just the numbers to get to what's really important. Retirement is one thing, estate planning is another thing. We just talked about those things, and let's walk through there. In estate planning, okay, when I was in estate planning, the question I used to ask was, how much money do you want to leave to your kids, when and how? And I got typically, I have 3 kids, split it 3 ways and give it to them when they're 30, 35, 40 or something like that. I mean, there wasn't a lot of thought into this. It was like, isn't that what everybody does? things dramatically changed when I shifted my question from that to, what impact do you want the inheritance to have on your kids? And very few people could give me an answer right away. I mean, I had to think about that for a little bit. And that's when you started getting responses like, well, I'd like them to be able to buy a house. It's kind of hard, you know, so I'd like to be able to help them get their first house, or I'd like them to have some things for their kids, and or if they want more education. That's when you started getting those kinds of responses. And when you got those kind of responses, then I could figure out, okay, what's it cost to do that? And that told us how much, when, and how. Because if your kids were, you know, really young right now, when they're going to need the money to buy the first house probably isn't going to be in the next year or two. On the other hand, if they're already 40, have kids, and they're, you know, and you want them to have to buy a house, you want them to have it right away. So this is where you also get into, as an estate planning attorney, the question about the difference between fair and equal. You know, sometimes it isn't exactly equal, or at least time. But the examples that I got, and I think this is probably normal, are things like buying a first house, getting out of debt, you know, paying off those credit cards, taking their kids somewhere exciting, you know, Disneyland or a trip or something like that, giving their kids some experiences. But then once you have that list, like I said, you can monetize it, and then you can figure out, okay, so now when and how do you do that? How much, that tells you how much and when and how. And one thing I found out from this, and that you'll want to remember, so no, write this down, is that I was talking less and listening more. I would ask the question and then listen. And it wasn't until later that I figured out that that saying that we use all the time, what they say is fact and what we say is opinion, made sense to me. Because when they say it, they mean it. I mean, they've declared it, and they'll do something about it. When you say it, even if it's the exact same thing, when you say it, it's your opinion, and yeah, well, let's see about that. So the more you can ask these questions, and the more they tell you, the better off you are. And you'll get real answers rather than just, oh yeah, that sounds good. Or if that's what you think, you know.
And I think, Rod, if I may, I would add that, you know, this is where you want to get a little bit curious and ask more about, okay, you want to help them buy their first house. What would that mean to you? What exactly is your intent behind wanting to help them buy their first house? Because there's a lot more there than just checking that box off.
Well, and same thing like with the car. Right. You know, I want them to help them buy a car. What kind of car? Is this a brand new car with, you know, and it's amazing how often I heard things like, no, like a 5-year-old Honda. I mean, a good solid car, not a new one, you know, so we haven't lost all that equity from the minute you drive off the parking lot. But, you know, this kind of a car. And you're right. I mean, the more detail you can get like that, the better it is for everybody. And the better it is that you can do for planning.
So, Rod, one of the questions I would ask back with my financial planner hat on, just to kind of get out of the dollars is, you know, what would you like your life to be like in 10 years? So, you know, maybe that's not totally in retirement. Maybe it's getting closer to retirement, but just helping them to imagine and then describe to you kind of where they see life going. And then that also helps you to be able to, you know, backfill with the numbers as needed. Well,
and sometimes you don't want to ask that in 10 years. You want to ask when the kids are out of the house, right? Depending on how old their kids are, because that's a big deal. I mean, when all of a sudden you're the empty nester, you have both time and money that you didn't have before. So that's another, you know, breakdown, you know,
milestone.
Milestone. Okay, so what do you want now? What do you want to do when the kids are out of the house? Then what do you want to do when you're retired, or however that works? But that is a milestone that you can't forget, because it's huge, and it changes, you know, there's a lot. I saw a study one time about how many divorces there were within 2 years after they were empty nesters, because they had all their time and money and energy and stuff in the kids, and they didn't know each other anymore. So what do you want to, at that point?
There's a question someone put in the chat here. I'm going to read.
Okay.
If you had the money to do everything you wanted, what would that include?
So
yeah, it's helping them to create that kind of bucket list, or from the beginning, and it's not set in stone, I guess, but it's allowing them to, to dream.
Well, and I love the way the frame was. If you had, how'd you say it?
If you had the money to do everything you wanted is what said.
Yeah. So take away I don't think we have enough. I don't know that we're going to have, if you take that away and you open up their mind, because they probably have, but then they can answer that question. Mm-hmm. So that's a great way of framing it. For financial advisors, okay, mine was when you die. Financial advisor is more retirement, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I talk over and over again. I'm in conversations with financial advisors or in meetings, and they'll say, like, how much money do you want to have in retirement? And inevitably, the answer is some round number, usually in $500,000 increments. That's totally meaningless. I mean, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2.5 million. I mean, but there's nothing that it's connected to. It's just a number. And so same kind of thing, the way you get out of that is to ask the question, what do you want to do in retirement? Mm-hmm. And then you write it all down, monetize it, and then calculate how much money they need to be able to do that. That shifts a lot of things. I mean, one of the things it shifts is if all they're doing is have a number, then every time this Dow has a correction, they're all freaked out, right? They call and get all these calls and stuff. The financial advisors I know that work off of the outcomes, and the people say, this is what I want to do. And, so you have a baseline number, what you want. At that point, all they care about is, am I still above the line? The fact that the Dow went down 20%, if I still have more than enough, I'm good. That's what I'm looking for. So it gives them a real anchor spot. It also makes it a lot easier for what you're doing. But that's another one, what do you want to do in retirement? And just write them all down and have them keep thinking. The first 5, 6, 7 are easy. I remember Brian used to say, I'd ask him for 20 things. Mm-hmm. They got about the first 12 were pretty easy, but they get to 18, 19, 20, they really have to think about what they want to do. But those are sometimes some of the best things to have and to calculate. So, and well, like I said, once you have that, they don't freak out every time the market goes down, and they just want to make sure that they're still where they need to be. And it's a number that they came up with, and you guys came up with together, so it's tangible to them. I mean, it's something that they can look at and work off of. So as you're getting that list of what it is that they want to do, this is where you also have to ask those follow-up questions. Because a lot of times you need to understand what they really want to do as opposed to what they say. And the example that I use all the time is actually one of my son's cases. He got brought in on this case. There's a husband and wife, both making really good money. I think one was an attorney and one was an accountant. And they'd been with the financial advisor for like 20 years. And they had their plan. I mean, they're planners. There's an attorney and accountant, okay? So these guys are planners. And one of the things that they had in their bucket list or whatever is when they retired, and they were going to retire at 65, they planned that 20 years earlier, they retired at 65, they wanted to buy a house on the beach in California, somewhere between Orange County and San Diego. Now, if you know anything about prices in Orange County on the beach between Orange County and San Diego, that's spendy sand. Okay, that's expensive sand. And so he got brought in with financial advisor because they had a little hiccup. And the little hiccup was when they were 64, they got a divorce. And so the wife was his client. He came in. And so he's like sitting her down and going, look, I know we've got all this stuff planned. You did a great job. But the beach house is a budget buster. it's just, there's just no way that we can buy the beach house. You only have half the assets that you had a year ago. And she was just devastated, you know. And so, you know, before they went on, Ryan goes, wait a minute, can I ask you a couple questions? And she goes, yeah, whatever. He said, okay, so if you had the beach house, what do you want to do with it? I mean, what are you looking to do with it? And she goes, oh, I've gotten into painting. And it's really good for my soul. It gets me, you know, I just want 2 weeks, me, paints, sand, ocean, that's it. Nobody around, just clear my mind, get, you know, that would just relax me like crazy. I really want those 2 weeks. Okay, what else? Well, my kids are around there. My grandkids are around there. And they couldn't all come at the same time, but I'd like 2 weeks that they can come visit me whenever they want to, or stay as long as they want to and all that stuff, to play with my grandkids on the beach. Cool. What else? Well, that's kind of it. And he goes, okay, so do you really want to buy a house on the beach? Or is it really that you want to have access to a house on the beach for a month every summer? And she goes, oh man, if I didn't have to buy it, I wouldn't have to pay taxes. I wouldn't have to do all the maintenance. I wouldn't have to do upkeep. She started thinking of all the things she wouldn't have to do. We'd be better off just leasing a house. Okay, leasing a house for a month on the beach was in the budget. Buying, you know, that same house on the beach, not a chance. But if he wouldn't have started asking those follow-up questions, it would have been done. You know, you can't buy the house. So that's a great example of getting those clarities, you know, so that you know what it is that they really want, as opposed to I just want a house on the beach. So again, let's test that chat feature. Enter a couple of questions that, you know, like the what do you want to do in retirement, to get past the numbers and to the outcomes that they want in retirement. And we are definitely need to get the music.
Right? Jeopardy music. So Rod, clarify that again. What was the request?
The quest is, you know, what are a couple of questions like, what do you want to do in retirement to get past the numbers, to get their desired outcomes for the services you provide. And so if you're a financial advisor, that's one thing. If you're a estate planning attorney, it's another thing. It's, you know, whatever you're doing, but for the services you provide, what is it that you could help with in retirement?
So yeah, enter a few questions that you have used in the past or something that you're just thinking about now, since you've joined the webinar, how you would phrase questions to get them to share. Don't be shy, people. Don't be shy.
See, this is the other disadvantage of a webinar. If this was an open thing, I could start pointing at people. So what do you think, Charlie?
Right.
And by the way, this recording will be available to you later on. And we can get you, if you send us an email or whatever, we can get you the stuff that was in the chat or whatever things we can add to this. Or leave it up to you when we start going.
So one question came in. It said, how do you want your life to be different in retirement? Or what would your life look like in retirement?
Yeah, be different is an interesting question. That's yeah, cool.
Yeah. And one thing I think I would add with that is, you know, we talk about this in our training, is making sure that you're aware of people's different modalities, right? So if you say, how would you feel? That's someone, that's a different modality than what do you think you would want to do in retirement, or how do you think your life would be different in retirement? So making sure you're just rephrasing things. If people aren't responding, just maybe use a different word or two, feel, think, see, and they might have a lot more to say after that.
And I had one case that made me change what I was doing when I was asking about retirement. Husband and wife, she worked at school, he had his own business and stuff, and he was getting ready to sell the business. And so they were sitting in my office, and he goes, okay, so I'm going to sell the business, it's going to be closed in about 6 months, and then we're going to retire. And she goes, you're going to retire, but I'm not going to retire. And he goes, what do you mean? And she goes, look, you won't have anything to, this has been your life. You're not going to have anything to do when you sell the business. I don't want you following me to the grocery store and doing, all this other stuff. So I'm going to work for another year or so till you get your life and figure out what you're going to do and then I'll retire. And I had never thought about that. But the more, as I worked with more and more clients, that's something to think about. Do you want to really retire at the same time, especially if one person's got a job, that's one thing. Another person, though, if they're like running everything and it's their life, it's who they are, that's a bigger transition. And so you may have, who's going to retire first, and when are you going to know it's okay for you to retire?
They need transition time.
They do, they do, and it was great. I mean, they accomplished a lot, and it took him about 18 months before she said, "Okay, I'm ready now. You've got enough of a life."
Mm-hmm. It's real.
It is. It is. All right.
What's your next request, Rod?
Next request is, well, not request so much as let's talk about categories. Okay, think about the different things, where things fit. So if you got like you and your wife or you and his partner, whatever, the groupings are things like while you're working. Okay, that's one thing. And not just while you're working, but for you, for your family, and for causes or organizations, stuff like that. So what would you want while you're working for you, for your family, for whatever you're working with? Then the second one on that is, all right, when you retire, same questions, right? For you, your family, causes, organizations, and stuff like that. And then the next kind of cliff is when one of you is gone. Same subsets. And this is an interesting one that a lot of people don't ask. I mean, you look at all this studies and stuff right now, we're having this big transition, so bigger transition than ever in the world. Well, they've been saying that since like year 2000. It's just that inflation has raised the number every year. But they talk about it going from mom and dad to kids. It doesn't really go from mom and dad to kids, right? Typically where it's going to go is from mom and dad to mom, because women outlive us men by like, 8-10 years or whatever. Then it goes to kids. And so there's a transition period in there that we don't really think about a lot. A lot of times the professionals we're thinking about, you guys, and then it's to your kids. What about that part in the middle? And how are you going to handle that? So when one of you is gone is a really interesting question that they probably have not been asked, because it's like you talk about them as a couple together when you're gone. Okay. You mean 10 years after he's gone, right? So, and then you got the next level down, which is your kids, right? So what about your kids? Now, when you're both gone, and then is when you get into that fair versus equal. Okay. Is it the same for all of your kids? Or do they have different needs and interests? Especially if there's like a special needs child or something like that. And this is where you get into Lori, your stuff that you've written on about preparedness indicators. I mean, how do you know that you're where you want to be? Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's, by the way, she wrote a book on this. So,
So yeah, I mean, my focus really was on like, how do you know they're ready for life after you have taken care of them? Or how do you know they're ready for the inheritance and the responsibilities that are going to come after you're gone? So really, what would give you that confidence that your kids are prepared? So we just kind of go through, what are some of the activities that you want to be seeing them do, or how you want them showing up, that kind of thing. So it's just a kind of a thinking exercise and brainstorming that we talk about when we meet. I also have a worksheet that just walks through different questions to really help the couples think about, what will give them that confidence that the kids are ready.
Is that things like they're living in a budget?
Right.
And the budget's actually up front. I mean, I have a lot of my clients that the kids' budget is, this is what I spent. So that's my budget.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So,
And
then
another
you got
thing
to
I get,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Rod,
No.
I was just going to say another thing that I would add to the, is it the same for all your children? And I guess I would add, is it the same that what you want for them is what they want for themselves? So for example, you gave the example of, well, I want to help them buy their first house, or I want to buy their first house for them, or their first car for them. So think about the different generations. That might be fine for baby boomers and Gen X's. They wanted their first house, but Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, a first house might not be something that they're striving for. Maybe it's being able to travel, being able to have a condo, or have, they want to rent an apartment to figure out where they want to live. So, being able to encourage your clients to really have those types of discussions versus saying, okay, we're going to buy your first house for you. Well, okay, that might not be the ideal for the generation of the child. So,
and the couple. I mean, one of the things when I was speaking at NAPA or one of those things, one of the speakers was talking about his entire practice is couples with no kids. Mm. And it's a completely different, there's no reason for them to buy a house because then they can move wherever they want to move to. And the planning is completely different. So that you need to know, do you plan on having kids? Because if they don't, building a big estate so that you can leave it for your kids isn't on the radar. It's, it's completely different mindset. And it's a mindset that mom and dad who have kids don't have, right? And really don't get. So that's one of the questions that, you're there, like you said, with those generations down the line. If there's some of them that just are like, we don't want to have kids, we're going to do our thing. That's a completely different planning process than if they're going to have kids and they're going to be kind of in the traditional thing that they want to have enough so they can leave something for their kids. So yeah, that's a question I forgot to put on here, but that's another question that we want to know about. Mm-hmm. And then, the next level after that is, what about other family and friends when you're both gone? Because a lot of times there are family and friends, extended family or friends or people that you work with or whatever that you want to do something for, or people who work for you that you want to do something for. I know several of my clients who are business owners, they have things in there for long-term employees who have helped them get to where they're at is part of their plan, because they help them get to where they're at, and they want to help them out when they're gone. So that's another question that rarely gets asked, even of business owners. But are there family and friends that you want to make sure that they get something, and if so, what and how and when and all that kind of stuff. And then you get the whole another set of questions if they're philanthropic. If they're involved in philanthropy, they have causes that they support, or want to support, or at least want to explore. That one starts at the beginning. I mean, while you're alive, what do you want to do upon your death, when you're gone? All three of those are different questions that they might have, or different answers that they may have. And then there's the other question is, are your kids involved in that? Because it's one thing if it's your cause for mom and dad. It's another thing if it's our cause for the family, in terms of how you plan for it. And you notice now, as we've been talking about this, how much the answer is going to be a number. Pretty much everything that we've said so far, all those answers are not going to be $12,730, right? This is
Beyond the
all
numbers.
beyond the numbers. But this is what's going to get you the numbers that you need to do the right kind of planning, or either estate planning or financial planning or whatever that you're doing with them. And it's rarely happens. We had one, I think it might have been before you were there, but we had one guy that was coming through our training, a financial advisor. And he started laughing about this when we got to this. And he said, I had a guy, a doctor, he came in my office carrying a box with all of his stuff, right? And he said, okay, I want to talk to you about, planning for my stuff. And then, and he looked at me and goes, well, first of all, where's your wife? Well, I do all this stuff. He goes, yeah, no, your wife needs to be here because she's probably going to outlive you. So, you need to have her, we can get started. And so they did a little bit. And then they came in the second time with his wife and his box. And Peter just kept asking questions about what do you want and stuff. And he goes, I don't get this. He said, I went to one financial advisor and he was giving me advice within like 8 minutes. I went to another one and it took him about 15 minutes, but they've all looked at my stuff and they were giving me advice right away. And Peter said, any schmuck can run the numbers, but you can only do it right if we know what it is that you really want and where you're really going. So I need to know all about you individually, as a couple, and as a family, so that we can do the numbers right, as opposed to just, we're going to invest in whatever. And he said the funny thing is that first the guy didn't know what to do with me, but after we got going, he probably sent more of his friends to me than anybody else in terms of, getting referrals and introductions. Having that different mindset and asking those different questions, it's one of those things, you think about it, you go to a new restaurant and it's a great restaurant. How many people do you tell? You tell all your friends, you got to do this. This is different. You start asking these kind of questions, you're going to start getting introductions from your clients, because this is something they're going to want to share with people that are important to them. So those questions, we'll give you some examples, then we'll let you put some in the chat. But it's things like, what do you want to do for and with your spouse during your lifetime? And same thing for your kids while you're still alive. What impact do you want inheritance, which is a question I ask all the time, when you're gone? And what would it mean to you, or what difference would it make in your life if you were able to achieve that? Because that's something, it's one thing to get what they want to do. It's another thing for them to identify what it would mean to them if they can actually do that, in terms of particularly giving them the incentive to make sure it's going to happen.
Yeah, anchoring it and really getting them to connect the dots, like, oh, this is possible and this is a priority for me. Or, if it's like, oh, it'll be great, whatever, then it isn't a priority at the moment. They're just dreaming. Mm-hmm.
There's dreaming, right? Yeah, it's not a priority. If I could do that, that'd be cool. How much does it cool mean to you, right? And for all of these questions, remember the appropriate follow-up questions. Remember, the beach house. What are you going to do in the beach house? Because money is never really the answer. It's what it can get you. So remember that, having those follow-up questions. And the other thing is, the question that rarely gets asked is, how are you going to measure success? How are you going to measure progress? In some ways, that's, your preparedness indicators. How will you know that they're ready? Because they've got these things. So how are you going to measure it? And that's not intuitive for most of us. I mean, we're not trained. None of my law school professors said you're going to ask those kind of questions. But you need to be intentional about asking these, and then those follow-up questions to get to what they really want. So should we have them do some more in the chat room?
Yeah.
So if you go back to any of the ones that you've done and think about, is there a follow-up question you would ask for that? And then how you would ask, how are you going to measure success, and what kinds of things you would look for to understand if they're succeeding or not and what they want. So we'll give you, 3-4 minutes to work on that. And we'll be back.
While they're doing that, Rod, how about I share some resources because one of the stories I'll share is, early on, when I first started going through the training and, questions are important. I was like, how do I ask different questions? And, just being able to look at different resources, get different ideas, understand what a good question is. So I really looked to find tools to help me. So for example, we have something called our short assessment or our Thriving Families checklist, I think we call it on our website. Yeah. If you have a client fill out some type of assessment, you can ask great follow-up questions depending on their answers. So, the first question on our short assessment is something about communication, having effective communication within the family. If they mark that as a priority, a great follow-up question could be, what does that look like to you? What would be involved in effective communication? So you can begin that conversation. So I'm sure there's other, questionnaires that you use maybe as intakes forms. I'm talking to our audience now, that you could definitely, use to begin a conversation from their answers there. Another resource that I've used is the Picture Your Legacy cards. I don't know if anyone can see them.
Lift it up a little bit. That's it. There we go.
Yeah, Picture Your Legacy cards. They're from 2164. So they just have all these different pictures on them. But what I do is just spread them out on the table and have them pick the ones that resonate to them or what they want their life to look like in retirement. Ask some type of question. But then you can look at those and say, okay, well, what intrigued you about that question? And begin the conversation to dig deeper. Other people have used their own personalized discovery cards, very similar to that. Another resource to get great questions is something called Table Topics. I think it's tabletopics.com. You can go online. They have a ton of different options you can choose from. And, what I do sometimes when I'm getting ready for client meetings and stuff, I'll just go through them to really jog my memory about all the different ways that you can ask a different type of question to get different answers. And then my final resource is the Book of Beautiful Questions. And then there's a follow-up one, More Beautiful Questions.
More beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, that just gives you like a bank of questions and it categorizes them. This one, phrasing things this way will help you help your clients make decisions. This one allows them to explore. So just really look for a tool or a resource that you can just review really quickly as you're preparing for your meetings. And that will really help you to prepare and be ready for asking those types of questions.
And that's one of the things, I get asked all the time, stuff like, well, yeah, you've been doing this for 40 years and you got all the questions down. How do I get the questions? There's a bunch of resources out there that you can start with. And some of these, especially if they're visual, those cards where they see, they look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's what I want, as opposed to being verbal. That can help a lot of people because a lot of people are more visual than they are verbal. And if you're just talking, it's one thing. They get to see a card or they get to see something that they can get excited about. Oh yeah, that's what I want. And then you can start asking the follow-up questions about what would that mean and all that kind of stuff. But getting them started, those are great resources.
We got a question here. I know we have a philanthropic advisor on the webinar. So the question example would be, what would it mean to you to be able to fund a scholarship for a low-income youth to attend college? So again, just allowing them to explore different perspectives, different options, and, what would it mean?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I know my brother is also a financial advisor. He had a client that was a doctor, and he was always talking to Rick and telling him, I have it so good because when I came out of college, I didn't have our med school, I didn't have that. So I could go into the specialty I wanted in the area I wanted. And I had classmates that had a whole bunch of debt, and so they had to go wherever the biggest money was. And so they were in areas they didn't want to be in, on specialties they didn't want to do. And that was his question to them. So what would it mean to you if you could provide a scholarship to somebody to give them what you have? And this guy just lit up. And it was like, how can we got to do this because the difference it made in his life.
Everyone's being shy.
See, that's the other thing. If this wasn't a webinar, we could start pointing.
Exactly.
Charles, what about you? What do you what do you think? That's probably why people watch webinars more. They don't have to worry about being called on. Okay, so if you do have any questions for us, go ahead and put them into the chat because we can save those and get back to you and let you know any of those. Again, as you're thinking about this, you want as much detail as you can get so you know you're getting what their true desired outcomes are. We generally stop with the first thing that they say, which may not be really what they want. And the more that they explain both what it is and how they're going to measure success or progress, gives them clarity and gives you clarity.
Yeah, getting to the why.
Yeah.
Behind what they want will help you in planning, right? It will help you realize what are some different options. I mean, exactly like the beach house example. What are some different options you can do in order to achieve that? And the questions that you're asking are allowing your clients time to think. And that is a gift. That is a true gift because life is so busy all the time. And people don't have a chance to really think about what they really want or why they really want it. For what purpose?
And those, again, if you're looking for introductions from your clients, those are the clients who are going to give you introductions. And I guess I learned this a little bit back in the 90s because as I was estate planning attorney, the Bar Association, the National Bar Association estate planning section did a study. And what they found was that there was like 60-some% of all estate plans were either never signed, not maintained, or not funded, which freaked them out. Not because the clients were getting bad services, but those are all potential malpractice claims. So then they went and interviewed the clients, and they said, why? I mean, what's going on there? And the general answer that they got was, I understood how it was my attorney's estate plan, but I didn't understand how it was mine. Because we weren't asking those kind of questions and we weren't clarifying if that's what you want, this is what we're doing. It was more of you take all the import and then they come in and you hand them the stack of papers this thick and say, sign here. It's all in there. Trust me. It's all there. But the more you have these conversations, the deeper the relationship is, number one, which is what's going to keep you clients and bring you more clients. But the better it is for them because they're getting what they really want as opposed to what the norm is. I mean, what they think they want or what you're imagining they want because you're using the same words, but you're thinking two completely different things. So those details are important. Okay, so now we're good. We're close. We're going to wind it down here a little bit and give you, some kind of the key things here for you. The number one key is getting out of the whole just money, right? So getting to their desired outcomes and not focusing just on the money, helping them to translate, I want $1 million. Okay, why? I mean, what is it that you would do if you had $1 million and all that kind of stuff? So getting their desired outcomes, and then that takes all those follow-up questions of exactly what does that mean, how you're going to get it, all those things. Those follow-up questions are the ones that build the relationship because now they know. One of the things that we found over the years is clients have kind of the top things. They want to be heard, which is usually about the money, what they have. They want to be understood, and the understood is who they are. They want you to understand why they're doing what they're doing, if they're philanthropic or they're this, so they want you to understand what they've got and who they are. And they want to understand how what you're doing is getting them what they want. So and then they also want their money to help and not hurt the next generation is kind of the next one. But those top three, by asking these questions, they know they've been heard. They know they've been understood because you've had that conversation back and forth. And they know that they're getting what it is that they ask for. Those are clients that are going to bring you more clients, and those are clients that are going to be yours for life. And probably their kids are going to be yours for life because their parents are so happy. So that's, and that includes things like Lori's preparedness indicators. Okay, what is it that you're looking for so you measure success? And then the one thing we didn't talk about here, but I'm going to add right now, when you're describing what you're going to do it in plain English, right? Do it in real words, no initials, no advisor or professional speak, just plain English. I had a client one time, he just sold his business, not a big one. He sold his business for, I don't know, like $10 million. I think his basis in his business, according to his accountant, was $49.17. I mean, he started it on his own. He was 87 years old. And he's given all the kids what he's going to have. He just wanted income for the rest of his life, and then everything was going to go to charity. Okay, if you've done any kind of those kind of plannings, probably things like, charitable remainder trust is just flashing in your mind. And he brought me in just to fill out the documents. I wasn't part of any of the negotiations. And so I looked at him and I go, has anybody said anything to you about a charitable remainder trust? And he said, well, no. And the attorney on the other side, thankfully, said, we're going to take a break because if we start signing papers, you're done. You need to go talk about this. So we went in with he and the accountant and we started talking about this. And I said, you haven't heard about this? And he goes, no. And his accountant said, yeah, I told you about this. And Bill looked at me and goes, what do you mean you told me about this? He goes, well, I told you, you need an NIMCRET. And there you go. Bill's going, what's a NIMCRET? So then I walked him through, okay, what if we could put this into a trust that's a charitable trust, so you're going to get some sort of deduction, going to get you all the income, and when it's all done, it goes to your, oh, that's exactly what I want. And then the accountant goes, that's a NIMCRET. But that's what we got to get out of the initials in the speak. You got to give it to them in plain English. And the big key I said at the beginning, listen more, talk less. What they say is fact, what we say is opinion. So I had to, try and get more questions than lecturing them. My brother is even more competitive than I am. And so we were talking about this one time and I said, okay, think 80-20 rule. You should talk 20% of the time and they should talk 80% of the time. So he had a partner and they had a client coming in that I knew. And he said, okay, so he said to his partner, I want you to take a stopwatch. Okay. And I want you to keep track of exactly who talks, because I'm going to explain to my brother, I got this. I mean, I nailed this. So he had this whole conversation. He said, I got done with him thinking I did really good. And so he turned to Michael and he said, okay, so how'd I do? And Michael said, well, it wasn't 80-20. It was 70-30. He goes, well, that's pretty good. He goes, yeah, but you talk 70% of the time. And the client talked 30%. He said, and I really thought I was listening. So, this is not intuitive for us, any of us professionals. So you got to think about that and make sure that you're asking the questions. Anything you want to add to that, Lori, before we close it up here?
Yeah, just ask if anyone has any questions, put them in the chat. We're happy to answer them. Also, if you're interested, you can always join our membership, get in contact with us. Membership applications are on our website. Join the like-minded professionals who are hanging out with us. Also, you can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We have additional conversations there where you can learn additional information, get information about our training.
Yeah. And just even if we're not going to train, anything we can do to help. So, yeah. All right. Is there anything else that's in the chat that we haven't seen?
That was it.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. And like I said, we'll have this available. So if you want to go back and watch it, you'll be able to get to it and watch it again. And that's going to be on the website, Lori? Is that where?
Yep, probably in 6 to 10 days.
Okay. So you can get this. And if there's somebody else in your office or somebody you know that needs to see this, give them the link. Thank you very much, everybody. And I guess with that, we'll say goodbye.
Thanks for joining us.